It looks like we're live, everyone. We're coming in a couple of minutes early because you guys are blowing up there in the chat room. And we wanted to make sure you knew we were coming up for this first official episode. So I think we've got people here. Ben, Caleb, should we just get this party started?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Okay, so let's start out by saying that this is the first official episode of Camera and Flask. And last year, Caleb, Ben, and I did a few episodes as sort of initial experiments in the world of drinking and speaking about gear and equipment related to photography and video production and filmmaking. And the thing that I want to say right off the bat, by the way, my name is Jem Schofield, and I am a producer, a DP, and an educator. I run the C47, and you guys can check out the C47, THE C47 channel on YouTube and see what's going on there. We are doing this show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and this is not my show, this is our show, so we are all hosts of this together. Occasionally, one of us will be on the road, and it may have to be done by just two of us, but most of the time we're all going to show up, and Ben is the one that suffers the most in this whole endeavor, being over in Europe. So let's start with you, Ben, because you are suffering, and it's the middle of the afternoon for us. So why don't you go ahead and do a quick introduction, and then we'll jump into and bring Caleb in.
All right, so I'm a photographer, filmmaker, so DP. I do a bit of training as well. I travel quite a lot for work. So at the moment, I'm in my native UK in the Lake District National Park, which is beautiful, but it's not the best for internet signal. So this week, I'm actually staying at my mum's house, and so we're dealing with the one line down the valley. So everyone's gone to bed now. It's 11 p.m. here, so I'm hoping that we're going to get enough bandwidth for this to work. Although, so it is late. I know it's middle of the afternoon for you, but it is more socially acceptable for me to be drinking whiskey at this time of day than you two alkies.
That is true, and don't judge us, or do if you want to. Caleb, come on into the party.
Well, gentlemen, I'm super excited. You already have your drinks ready?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We don't have to introduce.
We're doing what you're drinking. You got to do your introduction.
Pour your drink. I know.
Okay.
I wanted to cheers to our first episode, our first episode.
Okay.
Are we ready?
All
right,
here we
cheers,
go.
gentlemen.
Slanjava.
Episode 1.
Slancha.
Let it begin.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Introduction.
Yes, right. Caleb from DSLR Video Shooter. Camera reviews, tutorials, things like that here on YouTube. Super excited to have everybody here, and yeah, it's 5 o'clock here, 5:01, so it is perfectly acceptable for me to be having a drink.
And it's 3 o'clock for me, but I'm in Oregon. So in Oregon, people drink all the time anyway. And thank you, Jordan, for noticing my kulela. And that was not meant to be what it sounded like. I meant this drink right here. And so that is our segue to what you're drinking. Let's go ahead and I saw what Caleb was drinking. What a way to start off the show. Let's go.
So here's the deal. Before we jump into that, we'll give people an idea of what the formatting is going to look like. So like there's kind of an outline-ish that we might start with, we might change. The first thing is going to be, who we are real quick, and then what you're drinking. We're each going to have a different beverage. I have a feeling that I'm going to be like the ghetto guy when it comes to these two, because I consider myself amongst my people of my, my peers to be, a slightly more sophisticated guy.
Colt 45. Yeah, I'm listening.
But you won't ever catch me drinking like Bud Light or Miller Lite or any of that stuff.
Okay. Good.
But these two gentlemen are on a whole nother level. So I'm going to have to stock up. And with that out of the way, that's our first thing. We're going to, we'll get into the rest later. But that's why, Camera and Flask, cameras, flasks. Yes.
That's our deal. So we should start with you, Caleb, because you had the drink in hand. So tell us what you're drinking today.
Samuel Adams, Boston Lager.
Okay, good. I'm happy with that. I kind of
need a whole bunch of beers, only have access to Target, then Sam Adams or a Stella or something like that is kind of my baseline.
It was the first micro macro brew in the United States.
I will say that there's very few of their beers that I like. A lot of them, I just feel like I'm sucking on an orange peel. Like there's so much spice and it's ridiculous, or like peppery or whatever. So I don't really care much for a lot of those. Their IPA is not bad. Yeah. Boom.
Speaking of IPAs, Crux, the Fermentation Project, Half Hitch IPA, and I'm not an IPA person. That's just a plug. It's not what I'm drinking. All right, Ben, what's up? What's going on in that glass today?
All right, so one of the big advantages of being at my mum's is that she has the most incredible collection of whiskey. So I am drinking.
What?
Oh yeah. So look, check this out. This is a 20-year-old. We got this is from the Tobermory distillery. It's not Tobermory. This is a friend of hers who has a whiskey business. So they take casks that are unusual casks that have been bought as investments years ago, and it was kind of a con. But he then takes them from these people who've been had, and they then bottle them, and they're amazing, different things. And this is Tobermory. That's an island whiskey. So the island whiskeys tend to be a little bit more peaty.
Yep.
Kind of quite complex flavors, quite smoky. So sometimes a little prone to give you a bit of indigestion if you're sort of not in the right place for it. But this is very good. It needs a little water. It's cask strength. It's 55%. Ooh. You will taste nothing other than alcohol unless you put a little drop of water in there. And this is good stuff. So cheers. Jem, what are you on with today?
Very nice. And let me see how much is left in that bottle, because I don't think there'll be any of it left by the end of this episode here.
Yeah, I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah, that's not going to last.
People are asking for a wider shot of the bottle.
Okay.
Here, let me switch over. Go ahead.
And the only
wider. Bring it closer to you. Bring it closer to you, Ben. No, to you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. So this is.
Can you click on him, Jem?
I am. I have him. He's he should be solidly up. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Good. So we'll have to put that in. Maybe type that into the comments too, so we know which one that is. So for me today, I am going to an Islay whiskey as well. This is Kulela, and it's a 12-year. Unlike a Lefroy, which is kind of like drinking a medicine cabinet that was put into a campfire, this is a little bit sweet and a little bit smoky. And it kind of has a nice balance between the two. It's kind of like my... it's always in the cabinet whiskey right now. It's my favorite at the moment, but that will change, as it always does. There you go. Okay. So what have you gentlemen been up to this last week or two in terms of projects? Anything that's been interesting that you've been working on at all?
Go, Ben.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm catching up on a summer of bad weather. So I've been flying. So I didn't mention before, but I live in the Czech Republic and most of my work is still in the UK. So I fly backwards and forwards to do work, and the weather's been all over the place. So I'm catching up. So I've been at some great jobs. So I've been working in the mountains, two jobs in the mountains where we've been lugging gear. It's been amazing, this kind of autumn, beautiful, incredible light where you've got the temperature inversions and the mist hanging in the valleys. And it's just, this part of the world is amazing when the weather's good. And this week it has been really good. So this is this kind of work that you get very rarely, that really lifts your spirit and you feel amazing. And then I've also been doing a machine that cleans the udders of cows before they're milked and have been shat on 7 times.
It's a good thing, isn't it?
here and here this week.
This is the beginning of Camera Flask, just so that you know. So it will get looser and looser as this series progresses, I think. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so Caleb, what you been working on?
Nothing with udders, but
some dongles, though.
Yeah. Good dongles.
Okay. Yeah.
I have an employee starting on the 12th of October. So I'm trying to figure my life out and figure out how to get more desks in here, and going back to Apple hardware for my Hackintosh situation. So iMacs dealing with messed up orders from Apple. I went with the Visa mount iMac. I'd explained to like 4 different people what a Visa mount was. I mean, not just people, but Apple employees, like special. And
Yes.
so it's good. I'm really excited, and it's completely trashed in here. So just sorting that out, but it's gotten to the point where I finish shooting something, and as any of you out there who have done any kind of content creation involving gear know, gear is everywhere when you finish a shoot. And imagine that on a daily basis, but you don't have time to put everything back. So this whole 3-room space is just a nightmare constantly, because I finish shooting, I immediately need to import, edit, get that puppy ready, start writing the next one, deal with emails. And like YouTube is kind of half of my business. The other half is doing these camera guides. And I just finished the A7 III guide, self-plug. So I don't have, I don't have full-time YouTube time, if that makes sense. So I'm really excited to have kind of a studio manager take over / assistant editor. So that's what's up with me.
That's awesome.
Trying to get my
nice
studio in order.
How do you feel that that's going to be in terms of relinquishing control of stuff?
I'm ready to do it.
You sure?
Yeah, because it's full time. If this was a part-time like remote editor, I'd feel a little more sketchy about it. But this editor has already been doing stuff for me remotely. So it's like slowly figuring each other out, and it'll work great because we're going to start with just assistant basic assembly, which is takes up a good 2/3 a lot of the time. So getting that out of the way, and then I can do the kind of the fine tweaks and grade. And then as they get trained, it'll be great.
That's amazing. That's great that you've got someone that you're happy to do that with. I've always tried, when I've tried to do that and palm stuff off on people, palm stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the correct term.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's so difficult at the beginning. But when there's a camera guy that I work with a lot who's amazing, and you never need to worry about it. And if you have those people, it really does lower those stress levels. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll start with just assistant stuff. So cut out all the cut out the bad stuff, just basic. And then hopefully that'll eventually turn into like editing full videos. So, but also just learning the studio, keeping things organized and put away, just have a bin I can chuck stuff into and they can put away, and just help get more videos out essentially. So how about you, Jem? What's new?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge the crazy jumping, and you're right based on the notes here. And just a hello to everybody out there who's on the chat, including some people that I do and don't know. By the way, Gear Dads, we've got Slavic here. He is rebranded as Digital Filmmaker. So if you see that, there's some new articles and stuff going up under that brand. Simon, I am the gatekeeper today. So Google Hangouts has the annoying default functionality that when somebody starts to speak in these, 2 or 3 or 4 up chats, that it will automatically switch the camera angle. And so I'm going to try to stay on that a little bit more so that you don't have all of that jumpiness happening as we go through the episode. The more of this that's consumed, the less that might happen. I just have to say, and that's a disclaimer to everybody. But there you go in terms of that. So I moved to Oregon about a little over a year ago with my entire family. And I'm standing inside of a 3,600 square foot barn, which will eventually get converted into at least 3/4 of it, a studio and equipment and post-production space. So that is kind of the dream, and it is at least the space exists here. And once I put a lot of this into it, then that can happen. But in terms of work-wise, I've just been producing the new YouTube series, which is weekly now. We've now added this. I also have somebody who's come on board as, full-time working with me. So that's going to allow this to happen in an even bigger way. And then just finishing up a camera course for, not really a camera course, but a camera series for Able Cine, which is going to start to drop in the next couple of weeks. And the rest of my life is just, you know, doing production. So much like Ben, I'm on an airplane a lot of the time. Last week, I was actually training NBC Universal, people from Sci-Fi and USA and Oxygen. And we were doing full-day workshops, and I'll be going out to NAB in a couple of weeks to do a similar thing. But most of the time when I travel, it's not for teaching. It's actually for production. So it's actually doing that kind of stuff. That's what I got for you. And I think that what we really want to do, besides acknowledge Jordan's fantastic comments having to do with whiskey, and they are pretty awesome.
They are. I was going to mention the one where he's like, Ben, where is it?
Is it the Chelsea Northrup with the Lefroy?
I was thinking the Ben has life figured out tonight.
He does have life figured out. He does. And the reason that Ben is actually a little bit soft focus has nothing to do with his internet connection. That's actually what he looks like right now.
I want you to feel what I'm seeing. That's
it.
I have the setting. It's kind of the Ben after 2 dial.
I have a quick question on what kind of production I do. I do all kinds of corporate, sometimes music videos, a little bit of narrative. I might be best known for, especially without the beard, for producing a lot of educational content for companies in our industry. Canon very specifically, probably over 200 videos now. So if you've ever watched the video training series for C100, C100 Mark II, C300, C300 Mark II, C200, most of the XF series cameras, and a bunch of DSLRs, that's my ugly mug. But unbeknownst to a lot of people, I don't just come in and deliver that content. I'm the producer director, so I plan out the whole series. I hire the crews. We choose the locations. So it's real production work. It just happens to be in the guise of education. That's all. Okay, good. And I should have been on me there, but I was on Ben. So Ben gets the credit for that, but that's okay. I don't care. Okay, so let's go back to Caleb. Caleb, what's our topic for today? Let's do it.
Yeah, the topic for today is full frame mirrorless mania that's happening right now. And before we jump in, I just want to say you guys should all tap that subscribe button down below if you want to get these on the regular. Also, Jem has awesome other content, so I want to see that number blow up by 55, which is how many people are watching. So anyway, with that out of the way, full frame. It's this what the cool kids are doing these days.
It is what the cool kids are doing.
It's great.
So, Caleb, you probably, of all three of us, I would say, have not only had the most hands-on time, but have produced in the recent time period the most content around these camera systems. And you also are on the receiving end of just enormous amounts of love and whatever the opposite of enormous amounts of love are as well. But I'd like to start, if it's okay with you, to kind of lay out what these cameras are that have either already come to market or are coming to market. And if we're forgetting something, Ben and I will jump in, and then we can start to talk about our, I like that full frame war zone is a good way of putting it. Sort of where we are, Caleb, in this space right now, if that's cool.
Yeah, I think the recent explosion all started with Sony and the A7 III. They've been making full frames for a while, and then they come out with this camera. Previous to this camera, the A7 III, their A7, because they have 3 full frame cameras, the A7, which is their basic camera, the A7R, which is their high resolution. A lot of pro photographers go bananas for that camera. And then the A7S, which was kind of designed for like a low light, low megapixel kind of video-y, filmmaking-y camera, or just a good low light camera. Right? Am I wrong with that? Does that make sense?
You're totally right.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the A7 III comes out, and we were all getting ready for that to be a real meh camera, because previously those were, if you want a cheap full frame for photos, that's what you got. This camera drops, and they didn't really do many basic things with it. So it was a massive hit. It's still not in stock, right? In a lot of places. Right. If you have an A7 III and you want to make a quick $500 and you don't need the camera right away, sell it on eBay, because you can make about a $500 essentially rent the camera for free and also get a $500 check. So that camera comes out. They just start mopping the floor sales wise with every other manufacturer in the mirrorless market. I don't know about DSLR land, but $2,000 for a full frame camera that has just a perfect all arounder, 2 card slots, all these crazy features. And then I think that's kind of what started this madness. Now, I don't know when Panasonic and, you know, I'm sure everyone else was working on their cameras, but I feel like we now have a rush to get everything out. And Canon came out with their full frame. I'm not saying they overnight came up with the EOS R, but it's just very interesting that all this is happening at pretty much the same time or the same year even. So that's the kind of scenario. The lay of the land is the EOS R from Canon, this Nikon Z6, Z7, and the Panasonic S1 and S1R for next year. What else am I missing? Is that it?
Well, we have that odd little camera, which is the new Z1 from Zeiss, which is a fixed lens camera that is full frame. But that's obviously not interchangeable lens and is not for broad market. It's definitely a niche product, at least in its current form and featers.
I saw a great comment about that camera. Just sorry to butt in, but it was saying that's clearly been aimed at people who fly Lufthansa business class and buy stuff with their miles and more miles.
That's the Nikon camera or the Zeiss? Yep, that's funny.
And as someone who flies on Lufthansa very frequently, I think that's exactly what that thing's aimed at. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And then I think to just add, and though it's not the primary topic of today's, conversation, is that paralleling full frame in the mirrorless market is full frame in digital cinema cameras.
Yeah.
And so this has all sort of happened at the same time. Lens manufacturers, of course, are a big part of that huge equation. And they saw the writing on the wall, starting with the DSLR revolution when the 5D Mark II came out. And there was the start of a much expanded market in terms of full frame. I think companies were very surprised at the new market that was created because of that. But then some companies, and I would say that Zeiss was definitely one of them. We're seeing that Sigma is one of them, and some of these other companies. They were able to see that it wasn't just going to be about creating full frame lenses for DSLRs and even mirrorless cameras, but it was also going to be to serve the digital cinema market for that market as well. So it's it's blowing up everywhere, all over the place, and quite frankly, we win because of it. Because all of those lanes, whether they're in the mirrorless lane or they're in the high-end or mid-range digital cinema camera lane, we start to get more competition there. And we start to see more interesting camera systems that become more and more affordable to us over time.
Right.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
So the interesting thing, I was coming back from a shoot yesterday, I called into the local camera store here where I used to work 20 years ago. And I was talking to the manager there, and we were having this discussion about all this new stuff that was coming. And the big thing that we were talking about was glass. And you've got all these different formats out, all these different mounts coming out. And to me, cameras are like 2-year, 3-year lifespan. When I invest money in a camera, that's what I'm expecting to get out of it. Lenses, they've got to do me 10 years. That's kind of my general thing, is it's 10 years for lenses. So at the moment, it's still, with all these different mounts that are going on, what are you doing in terms of lenses? Because we don't know that some of these cameras are going to suit one person better. Are we still going EF for everything? That's kind of my thing. I'm still thinking EF is the thing to put money into still on glass, because everything can be adapted now. What do we think?
It's still that case, but I think more and more we're going to start getting into some funky waters. Like, yes, it's safe because it's going to work on Canon. It's going to work flawlessly pretty much on the new Canon stuff. Nikon, I mean, I did that video recently on the A7S III. If that has just a couple things on the video end, which I know is not a big market still, there's just not enough there. in my opinion. So to invest in all these new Nikon lenses that they're coming out with, it's going to be a tough one, knowing that it's just a brick for every other camera body. So yeah, we were talking on my stream. It's just like the dongle situation. Jem brought that up with the Apple devices. We have all these adapters we're gonna have to be juggling. But I think you're right. I mean, if you're thinking Canon, Sony, you're still pretty solid. But Sony's starting to get really good with their optics. I mean, their G Master stuff is incredible.
It is, but it only works on Sony. And if you're putting money into things and these features that are coming out on different cameras, and I was listening to your show earlier, and what you were talking about with the different manufacturers, then it's the bit depths that are coming out, the color spaces that different manufacturers are using. And EF still seems to be that kind of de facto thing that goes onto everything. Whereas the Sony, you can't put that on anything else.
Yeah,
I mean, Sigma can figure out how to, and they're kind of doing this now with their MC11 adapter, I think it's called. Yeah. But I mean, they have to be just so excited about what's happening in the world,
right?
Because they're in the perfect position just to go to the bank every day.
It's true. I mean, I think that one of the things that's interesting is what lens mount system do you invest in? But then the question is, and it's a much harder question now, which lens mount camera do you invest in? Because prior to these recent announcements by Canon and to a lesser degree Nikon for you, Ben.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to make sure that you know that
you say you are one of us as well. You've still kept your British nationality, haven't you, now that you've defected?
Okay, so we're going to continue now, and I am very much British. That is true. Okay, so but I don't sound it because I moved to the States when I was 7 years old. So here we go. So the lens mount you chose, if you wanted the most versatile mirrorless base camera system, was easily going to be E-mount because it was the most adaptable because of the the flange depth or lack thereof between that and the sensor. But now with EOS R and with what we're going to get with Panasonic's system and that coalition and everything that's going on there, and again to a lesser degree with Nikon, it is going to be, as Caleb said, a much harder decision to make in some respects, because it's going to be what adapters do you want to get into, and for what camera systems. And I think that for some people, that's also going to be dictated by whether or not they use mirrorless cameras and they use digital cinema cameras. Right. Because that is also part of the decision-making process that a lot of people get into. They start to look at, even though the sensor might be different, Panasonic's color science is going to sort of sit in a certain place, and Sony's color science is going to sit in a certain place, and Canon's is going to sit in a certain place. And while they may not match perfectly when you're using their mirrorless or DSLR and their digital cinema camera, it's still part of our decision-making process in terms of using smaller format cameras as B or C cameras along with other cameras in the line.
Which is then still EF.
Potentially, yeah. For sure. How do you feel about that, though? Yeah.
Well, because I think, so someone that uses digital cinema cameras and is using mirrorless cameras, the EF, that fits into all of that. So in the last couple of months, I've shot stuff on the EVA 1, I shot a project on that, I've shot stuff on the FS5, and they go on the A7s as well. So all of that stuff works with the EF, and that seems to still be the most common standard across all of those things. So that to me is the only place that I put money into glass right now still, and that needs to be open to anything.
And are you talking about still? I'm sorry, Jem, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to lob something to you, but go ahead, Caleb. Yep.
Are you talking about stills? And you are, but are you okay with the performance of Canon glass on Sony bodies for autofocus?
So I'm using Sigma glass generally with the MC11. And the AF, even Canon EF glass with the MC11 on the A7. My main stills camera is the A7R, and it works great. Yeah, I'm really pleased with it. So I'm happy with things the way they are right now. The interesting thing about the new Canon, and to me the new kind of mirrorless system, it's not of interest where it is right now. But what's really interesting is the mount that has the ND possibility to go into it. That's huge. That's the thing that will make that system, because then you get things like, well, it's one, just a pain in the ass of actually having to use a variable ND and having that around with you and all of that stuff. But the real advantage is being able to use those lenses, things like the Sigma 20 and the Zeiss, the wide Zeiss. You can't stick a screw-in filter on the front of those lenses, and that opens all of that up. So that's
very true.
That's really exciting to me.
Yeah,
not that camera, but that system and what that will become.
And our friends over in, what's the city in China?
Oh, yeah, Shenzhen. Shenzhen.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. Shenzhen. How do you say it?
Place. Yeah. Yeah. You got it. You got it. It's not going to take long. I mean, there must be some like.
I'm going to go grab some. You guys talk. Keep talking. Okay. Grab something.
I feel like there must be some crazy patent, and I'm sure it's difficult to do the ND, the electronic ND, but it's. Right. I mean, Aperture's done it. The company Aperture. It actually is really good.
It is.
It's just the form factor is horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget the remote. Just make it like that Canon one. Give me a little we don't even
handle anything else. You just make it like a Metabones. Just make it that form factor, but put that in.
And it's okay if there's a brick off camera for power, but put it off camera, because that's impossible, that thing to use. Every time I'm like, oh, use the adapter. And then it's this honky jonky. I can't use any cage with it, any battery grip, a tripod.
Right.
Jem needs to make himself feel better and show off a camera.
No.
Go ahead, Jem. Go ahead, Jem.
Stop it. We're talking about lens mounts here.
We are.
So this is going away in about a week or so. This is
Kinfinity.
This is the Kinfinity Mavo, and we're talking about different lens mounts here. This is not the full frame one, but it's right now it's got an EF mount because I switched it. It had a passive E mount. This is not a passive, so this is actually passing data for the EF mount, and there's a PL mount. So the idea of switching mounts on cameras is not something that we think about doing except for with lens adapters on mirrorless cameras. But I think that swapping mounts for the lenses you want to use is going to become more and more commonplace. And we'll probably start to see more of these electrically charged variable ND solutions come to market that are a little bit better than the old janky ones that we were looking at that didn't really work, and they had huge power supplies attached to them with all these cables.
When you get that right, I was shooting on the FS5 yesterday, in fact, and the very ND on that is just magic. That thing's amazing.
Yeah, you can pull ND. Which is crazy. Exactly. So, you're walking from inside to outside, outside to inside, and you can lock all of your other settings in your camera system, and it's the ND which is adjusting. And that's not something that we're used to doing in production. But what we're always trying to retain more than anything else, besides clean noise levels, is we want to lock in our depth of field, because that's part of what we're trying to do. And we have to compromise on that a lot of the time with other camera systems, because we don't have this ability to pull ND. And I know that sounds a little bit crude, but sometimes you want to pull ND. Okay, Caleb.
Jordan, have a good night. Thanks for joining us, boss. No, I think that the way those guys have that mount set up, a crazy short flange distance, and then you can put whatever you want on it. I think that's great. And I think it'd be amazing if someone comes, or somehow, just like HDMI or DisplayPort, there's like a board of standards, and we get the USB-C of lens mounts. Wouldn't that be great?
Yep. That would be amazing.
Somehow everyone came together, and they never will, I don't think. But somehow everyone got together and was like, here's the universal...
This is the equivalent of the 60s hippie dream of technology. That's what it's now come down to. A common lens mount.
Yep.
Okay, so why don't we start talking about... Thank you, Drew, for that offer. Why don't we start?
This is getting really juvenile.
Hold on 1 second. Why don't we start to talk a little bit about the other ingredients that are being introduced slowly, but more consistently into full-frame mirrorless cameras, and where we think that's going to go in terms of bit depth, chroma sampling, and where else it's going to go in terms of these cameras. And look, we know where we want it to go. We want it to be compressed RAW with a built-in variable ND system with an elegant XLR solution that is no larger than the GH5S.
It has 5-axis excellent in-body stabilization.
No,
and
7-axis. Yeah, and surround sound.
So it's actually damping for time.
Right. Now that we're in reality world where there's no perfect camera, why don't we talk a little bit about, digital filmmaker, when they say invest in glass, they didn't mean fancy whiskey glass. That's true, but mine's a whiskey without an E, not with an E right now. So that means a lot. I just have to say.
So yours is with an E? Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah. So we've got, isn't that right? US is without an E? Is that the way it is? No, Scotland is without. Scotland's without.
Scotland's without.
Irish. I said mine is without an E, and then that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And then
Scottish without an E, and E is Irish. Yeah,
that's true. Okay, good. All right. So Caleb, why don't we start talking a little bit about the whole other parts of what make a camera system beyond, of course, the obvious, which is the size of the sensor and the resolution, which we know is going to be 4K. And Brian, stabilization does still matter, but it depends on what kind of shooting you're doing. And I think that Caleb could maybe start with that stabilization importance.
So it's important if you're just going to be turning around handheld. I do see the merit of not having stabilization because you have a rock solid sensor. Like anyone out there, do this. It'll be really fun. If you have a camera with 5-axis, take the lens cap off, relax. It's going to be okay. I know some people like flip out if there's nothing in front of the sensor. It'll survive just for a second, okay? And have it on something not super stable and just tap the side of the camera. Watch what happens. The sensor is jello. Like it's just obviously when it's on, it's active and it's inside of a magnetic field and it's not moving, but the sensor is just kind of floating around. So if you want to shoot the next, Mission Impossible, you're not going to use that on a motorcycle or on Tom Cruise's face. You're going to use something solid. So I think there's merit for that, especially since all these gimbals are getting so good and small and they can handle more weight. I mean, we're almost in the perfect situation where you have a tiny little gimbal and you can throw that Mavo on there, Yes. Or you can do that right now pretty much. So I think that's pretty sweet. But then at the same time, the fact that you can one-hand a GH5 out of the side of a car in India on a dirt road and it look cinematic, that's wild. Like if you haven't used a GH5 handheld, you owe it to yourself to just go to a camera store and try it because it'll blow your mind. Or rent it for a gig. Everyone that I've talked to, I mean, that same friend who's thinking about the EOS R, they're buying a GH5S and they have 2 8K Reds. They have like the best of the best, but they just for small stuff, they can't stop shooting on the S. So anyway, long story short, it's great, but on these big sensors, it's really hard to do right. And Sony's in a real pickle because they have to keep the sensor in a certain position with the lens mount. The lens mount's very small, so they don't have a lot of flexibility with how they deal with stabilization because they can't move the sensor around a ton. Whereas Canon and Nikon, if you think about it, like this little, I'll use my phone and an SD card. Actually, that's impossible. I can't really show it that way. The point is the sensor, the lens mount is huge and the sensor is smaller in the center. So the sensor can move around that big circle a lot easier. Sony, you're kind of stuck. So we're not going to really see anything that's going to handle that unless they get weird. with some kind of solution. So you have that to pay attention to, and also heat. I didn't know until the last couple months that stabilization creates a huge amount of heat in the camera. So you have a processor trying to handle showing you the image, showing you waveforms, zebras, all this information, and record information, keep the sensor cool, deal with the IBIS, and you also have a battery that's just like offloading tons of heat in this camera. So adding in-body stabilization is tricky there. Anyway, that was a lot of talking, so I'll stop.
No, but don't. Would you agree, Caleb? One of the things that you have to talk about when you're talking about stabilization is how you shoot with the camera, because the laws of physics say if you have a heavier camera system, it's easier to stabilize. And if you have a lighter camera system and you're trying to hand hold it, you're going to notice shake more than if you rig that up onto a shoulder rig and you basically created a bigger camera out of that smaller camera system. So if your style of shooting is generally to hand hold that camera system, and that's the style of shooting that you like with these mirrorless cameras and to the same degree a DSLR camera, then having either lenses with image stabilization or having in-body image stabilization is going to be a huge advantage to that type of shooter. But if what you're trying to do is you're trying to, find that middle ground there, then you can gain advantages by going with something like the GH5S as opposed to the 5 with that slightly larger field of view and some of the other benefits, which you actually shot a whole video on your channel. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and like the S is almost perfect because you can build it up and actually use it like a handheld. And I should mention that gimbal, I don't consider that. It's a completely different thing, right? It's like a it's like a knockoff Steadicam look. It's not handheld, so there's that.
There are fighting words there, Caleb. Knockoff Steadicam look.
Like it looks amazing, but it's not handheld, right?
No.
So if you want an actual handheld look, you have to beef up that GH5S. But the beauty with, and I'm specifically talking about the GH5, is that that stabilization, the in-body stabilization, looks like you have this monstrous Hollywood rig and your own handheld. Everything else, Fuji, Canon, well, Canon doesn't really have anything right now. Sony, it all is kind of cheesy looking. Like if you hold the camera perfectly still, it's got a sort of kind of normal look. But if you try to do anything remotely, not even close to dramatic moves, it's like, oh shoot, we're moving, stabilize it. Whereas the GH5, unless you're on super wide lenses, just looks incredible. And they have this thing called IS lock. So pretend you have a 600mm lens and you're pointed at a jet airliner in the sky. That's impossible. It's just going to look like a blur the whole time.
Yep.
You can turn on IS lock on the GH5, and I kid you not, it's a still frame. It's incredible. So it's designed to hold still, and it creates a static frame like you're on sticks. It's mind-bogglingly good. Like every time I use it, I can't believe it. It's your handheld on a long lens, and it's like you're on an O'Connor head. It's unbelievable.
That's crazy.
So all that's because they have that smaller sensor. They have more room. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do with larger sensors. Like I'd love to see that SL mount with an APS-C sensor and some like stupid, insane stabilization because they have all that room.
Now for you, Ben, your main camera system right now is the A7R II, right? That's the camera.
For stills, yeah, for stills.
Yeah, for stills. But what are you shooting video on most of the time?
All sorts. I do shoot a bit of video on that. So if it's something that I need to travel light, I did a gig in India that I was having to travel sort of quite incognito. That was a brilliant camera system for that. Worked very well. But I'm shooting still on the FS700 because so that with an external recorder is great.
Yep.
That still gives a really nice image. And I'm still struggling to decide what to go into next. I'm still not happy with that because it's bulky and it's horrible to use in a lot of ways. The image of it's great. But and this whole mirrorless full frame thing is great. It's very exciting to me because if I'm putting money into something, I want it to do both very well.
Yep.
And so it's things like the GH5, which is amazing for video, and I've shot video on that for projects. I don't own one, but I've used one. It's not a great stills camera. You know, for the work that I do, that doesn't cut it for that. So when we go into sort of this new set of cameras that have been announced this week, it becomes interesting. Because if I'm investing, I want it to do both jobs. And I don't want to be taking separate cameras for each role, if you like.
It's an interesting space that we're in right now because I have tried very hard over the years, regardless of whether I'm shooting mirrorless or digital cinema cameras, to get away from external recording. I can't get away from external monitoring because, you know, the screens are too small. And so you could argue that if it's got a recording function there, then, you know, that's a bonus. You're using it as your monitor and your recorder. But not every company that makes a monitor recorder is always my preferred monitoring solution. So then you start to think about, well, if I like small HD for monitoring and they don't have recording as an option, then do I also want to tack an Atomos on there, which I really like. The Ninja 5, you know, is a perfect complement to a lot of these new mirrorless full frame cameras that we're talking about. Because they're spitting out 10-bit. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but this whole thing with it's that if you're taking all those different monitors and you're taking the recorders, and if you're doing interviews, that's fine. You can do that. But like, this is where I've just put this little screen grab up now. Yeah. This is the guy I was working with, put this on Instagram the other day. But this is what I was carrying up a mountain, like a proper big mountain. So we walked the whole day up this hill with this stuff. So that's an FS5 with an Atomos on it, with all the batteries, with a backpack with lenses on. Like, my back's killing me all the time. Like, I want to stop using the external recorders. That's a huge thing for me at the moment.
But for Caleb's, you know, and for a lot of people who are using mirrorless cameras day in and day out for their production. Yeah. Caleb, for you, I mean, you know, the Ninja 5 coupled with some of these newer solutions, and obviously when Panasonic comes out, we're expecting at least 10-bit externally, maybe internally as well. The Ninja 5 is a really nice display, but it's a very elegant, relatively small solution for monitoring and recording. What are your thoughts on that piece of kit as part of, you know, what this next evolution of mirrorless full frame cameras is?
Yeah, I mean, that thing is, it feels, again, this Red buddy, I hang out with him a lot these days, and he loved it. He was ready to throw some plastic at it because he came from that, you know, Red camera display on top. He likes that kind of a little bit of weight. So you throw a cage on your GH5 or GH5S, or a battery grip and a cage, and now you've got this excellent little, and I felt like such a tool talking about that monitor recorder, because there's nothing I dislike about it. Like, if you either the Inferno or the Inferno Ninja, no, you have the Inferno.
So I was shooting on the
Inferno. Yeah, Shogun Inferno.
That feels like Fisher Price compared to the Ninja 5, like the quality.
Do we know what the battery
plastic? It's better. It only has one slot, but everything's smaller, so it's not chewing up as much. The fans don't have to run as much.
Okay.
They're
horrible.
Wait, can I have an aside question for you though, Caleb? Just as a quick question, because you mentioned this just now. Should we all try to get a Red buddy? Is that like something we should be striving for? Because you have a Red buddy, and maybe we should have a competition in terms of
how many Red buddies you got,
how many Red buddies you can have. Because maybe I need to get a Red buddy.
No, it's funny because like he's a great guy and he's tried lots of different cameras, but you know, once you've achieved Red, you're kind of like, all right, I'm the best. I have the best.
Ooh.
But what's hilarious,
pinnacle.
Well, it depends how you talk to. But what's funny is like he wants and he keeps borrowing stuff from me because he keeps using this GH5S. Because if he's going to do all these little gigs, he doesn't want to haul a bunch of Reds, all the batteries, the cinema lenses, the whole thing. If he can just grab a GH5S and a couple tiny lenses and get it get the job done.
Right.
Like he's been rocking the G5S in a 7 to 14. And, you know, you can go nuts with such a small, lightweight camera package.
So that is the thing. So that is the whole thing with the mirrorless. It's this weight thing. And when we're talking about traveling particularly, and someone had just mentioned, what about the new Blackmagic camera? And that's kind of an interesting, I know we're not full frame with that, and we're obviously down to Micro Four Thirds again, but that's an interesting camera. We don't know if it's any good yet, but on paper, that's very interesting to me, because I could take 2 of those in this little backpack that I have as a carry-on, set the lenses, you've got 2 completely matched cameras, and you're shooting in good codecs, internal, no need for rigging that thing out. But, you know, it's Blackmagic, so we'll see.
I think that we also need to acknowledge, and then we'll just get Caleb's take on Panasonic's full frame and possibly Sony's full frame future, that APS-C / super 35mm size sensors still have a huge place in our production world. They are by far the most common sensor size when it comes to creating video-based content out there. And I think that one of the things that I'm excited about, even though we're talking about the full frame mirrorless madness, is how the super 35mm small form factor cameras evolve. Because in theory, even though everybody's getting on the full frame bandwagon, we could see 10-bit 422, you know, maybe even compressed RAW in those sensor sizes even faster than we see them in full frame cameras. And quite frankly, that's a sensor size that, in terms of selective focus and depth of field, that gives me a tremendous amount. Most of the full frame cameras also do have a crop mode, Sony being, you know, the main one. And we also open up a whole other slew of lenses that we can use with those camera systems, both from the stills world and the video world. So I think, I don't think this is the death of Super 35 / APS-C based camera systems. I just think that we're getting another thing that has been given to us in the market, because at a certain point, resolution caps out to a certain degree. We'll have the whole 8K for 4K, 4K for 1080 conversation in another episode, and I think that's a great thing to talk about, and the reality of that. But, you know, resolution has kind of settled a little bit. We kind of know where we want to get to in terms of bit depth, 10 minimum. We know that we want at least 422 chroma sampling, and I think that we might get there faster internally with APS-C / Super 35 before we get there with full frame. Gentlemen, any feelings on that? Whoever starts speaking first, I'm clicking on.
Well, the other thing that I would mention on all of that is that the biggest announcement of the last few weeks that's excited me in terms of ongoing development of camera systems is that Blackmagic RAW.
Yep.
More than any of the camera systems, is that what that's going to give us going on once that starts to get implemented in, and that these smaller form factors are going to be able to process that data. And we're not talking about enormous file size and enormous data rates. So that's going to give us, you know, we were talking about greater bit depths, but being able to do the RAW on smaller form factors, that's what's really going to open that whole world up to us, I think, and giving us what we want in terms of sampling.
And that's open source,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
which is kind of a kick in the nuts to Apple, right?
Totally.
Yes, it is. But I want to bring something up here, because we're talking about RAW now, and let's talk about the realities of production to post-production workflows. When we record internally to a camera in a compressed RAW format, which is what Blackmagic RAW and ProRes RAW are, but they're very smart algorithms and all of that kind of stuff that go on. We have to understand that RAW recording is not viewable by us. It is not actually a video signal. So when we drop it into a timeline or we play it back on a monitor on our camera system, there is generally a debayering process that's going on, and it's turning it into a video signal to us in real time. But the advantages of RAW are the obvious ones that Ben started to talk about. But the disadvantage to RAW is that you always are going to have to transcode, or whatever we call it, basically convert that into a video signal. So we're always going to have double media when we are in a RAW-based workflow at some point or another, unless the NLEs, which they're starting to arguably, get so fast that we can work with these compressed RAW signals in real time, and then it's only in the render that we're actually creating a video signal. So there's there's all of those things to consider, and a lot of it's going to have to do with the computer systems and sort of, you know, what NLE or application they're working with. That's going to have a factor, I think, to a degree.
Is. Yeah, of course it is. But I think the thing, so I've been working with a lot of DJI raw footage off drones recently, and on the exact same system, which was a PC purpose-built to run Premiere well, Premiere, as soon as you stick that footage into it and you stick it on a timeline, it takes 3 hours for that. And this is a fairly high-spec machine before I can play that back.
Yep.
Stick it in Resolve on the same machine, it plays in real time straight away, and I can grade it live as I'm playing it back.
Yep.
So it's getting there. It's not, it's at the moment, the way Resolve's working and the way Resolve's being developed, that's now becoming my go-to NLE. It's not perfect, and there's things that I still need to take it out to a different NLE, particularly graphics. That thing's still terrible with, but I'm finding that a much more efficient piece of software to use than certainly Premiere. Final Cut, because I'm on a PC, so I'm not using that as much. I still have a Mac laptop, and that is an efficient piece of software as well. But Resolve is handling RAW very, very nicely at the moment.
Yep.
And getting better. So we're getting there.
This is a ginormous, ridiculously large topic. I think it's a topic that has something to do with full frame. It also has to do with all of the other ingredients that have to do with capturing an image in camera. We can see that in an hour, we can't cover all of this. I think that what we should probably do is turn it over to the golden child over here. That's the golden child. And Caleb, maybe we should do a little Q&A with everybody who's here and start to answer some questions related to this topic and get into some interaction with everybody. Feelings on that? Is that cool with everybody?
No, I think that's great.
Go for it.
They've been having a great time in the chat, and I'm sorry I haven't been interacting on either stream. So Digital Filmmaker, going way back in the chat, asked an interesting question. If the 1DX Mark II was the same price as the EOS R, which would you buy?
Holy shoot. You heard what word I really said. You know, I haven't shot with the EOS R yet.
Right.
But I would say that I'd still go with the mirrorless option at this point in time. Yeah. I mean, I think that we have to understand that there's stuff that goes on under the hood in all of these camera systems that is borrowed from higher end cameras, borrow from lower end R&D, you know, and then lower end cameras borrow from higher end R&D, and that the EOS R is a more evolved camera system internally than the 1DX Mark II. It's a fantastic camera system, but it's heavy. And if the argument is that you are going to mirrorless because of size and weight and all of that stuff, then it's a no contest whatsoever. You know, you can absolutely match both of those cameras in some form factor with, you know, with the bigger cameras, but I would still say the newer system overall. I guess that's my answer to that. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I'd go the other way, but only because I live in both worlds and it's an amazing stills camera.
Nice.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah.
This isn't a question, but it's kind of interesting. When we were talking about the RAWs, and I mentioned Apple getting kicked in the nuts by they have their closed world, and someone and Blackmagic have this open source solution now. And someone said, well, then Apple will just buy Blackmagic. And I was like, They can afford it. It's a privately owned company.
Grant will never let it happen.
Yeah, he wouldn't. But let's pretend Grant was ready to go give up the lot. Give up. Gotta give up.
That's
if Grant was willing to give up the days of live streaming their announcements
in log/raw
log, and he wants to spend some time in Orlando. Okay, let's just pretend that's the scenario. Apple could buy Blackmagic, and wouldn't that be interesting? Huh?
It would be.
I don't think it would be the craziest thing that's ever happened in the world.
They would kill Resolve day one.
Yeah, but they would also absorb whatever raw tech that they have that, you know.
Yeah, but they'd make us all use Macs.
True.
Next question.
Anyway, interesting. Okay, go on.
Next question. Moving on. What do you guys favorite camera to shoot with? Go, Jem, then Ben.
Me? I'm first?
Yeah, I'm just to move it along.
I mean, the simplest cameras to shoot with in terms of video is the Arri cameras. It sounds ridiculous, but I mean, they're like film cameras, but in a digital format. The hardest thing about the Arri ecosystem is all the crap that is the part numbers that make everything that gets attached to the camera systems and remembering what those are. But when it comes to turning on an Arri Alexa, an Alexa Mini or an Amira, it's about as straightforward as a camera can be. And it's, you know, I would say that the next most straightforward, save for the EVA 1's menu system, notwithstanding, is Panasonic, because you either shoot in video or a log format. You could argue Blackmagic's that way as well, but there's a color science thing there that's a little hard to get used to. So I would say that Arri, if you have your money, easiest camera to shoot with. But for day in, day out, pull it out of the bag. C300 Mark II and FS7 II are probably the two cameras. FS7 II only in Cine AI mode. I have a workflow for that I really like. And then when it comes to the smaller format camera systems, historically, I lean more towards the Canon because of the size of the sensor and the color science. Though I do have an A7S, you know, camera, and I like it very much, but I struggle with unless I'm putting it into Rec 709 for the color space. So I guess that's my answer there. I don't know if that's good, but there you go.
Ben,
ask me what was the exact wording of the question again?
Favorite camera to shoot on right now?
What camera? By the way, I just said 17 cameras. By the way, Ben.
You did.
You're easy. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to give a shorter answer, and now I don't know because it's horses for courses. I think there's cameras that I like.
What's the camera that like when you shoot with it, you get kind of like giddy and like sparkly inside?
Yeah, it's warm and fuzzies.
Yeah.
Honestly, the camera that I get warm and fuzzy when I shoot on right now is my EOS 1.
Interesting.
Really? Okay.
Film camera.
For
the
stills,
original,
yes.
Like this, I've started shooting loads of film again, and I'm not in that kind of like. Just, it's great because I know there's a big fashion for this and this whole hipster thing with the. Not that, just that there's this beauty about thinking and slowing down and going. You've got 36 frames on this roll of film. You can't shoot 30 frames to get the shot. You're going to have to think and expose properly and work it out. And there's something very healthy and interesting and great about that. So right now, that is the thing that I feel some passion for when I shoot with it. The other things are tools to make money.
Nice.
Can we look at Loom's question here? I think it's a valid question, and maybe a good one to just bring up really quick. Should I, Caleb, do you see it there, or do you want me to read it?
No, I was getting down to him. That's a great question, Loom. Full HD, is it not an option for you guys? Does it really have to be 4K for you? Because ... what are the reasons? I'll jump in real quick and get mine out of the way. 4K, because I think it really is future proofing. There was a while where we could say 4K and release in 1080, but these days more and more people have 4K displays, and trust me, if you haven't seen your HD footage on a 4K 2732-inch monitor, it looks really soft compared to watching 4K. Even on a YouTube, you know, small video, not full screen, you can tell the difference really quickly. And then post-production, you can do so much with 4K. Like when I do my camera guides, I always shoot everything 4K, and I can create, you know, 4 to 6 different pseudo camera angles, which I know is not the correct way to do it. But if you're creating 7 hours of training material, you need to cut to something, you know. So, and again, clients, if you're talking about corporate industry, that's going to be gold. That's going to make you tons of money, I think.
Right. Yeah, well, agreed completely. It's a safety net, 4K for me. Most of the work that I do is corporate stuff, and to be honest, I'm not sure I've ever output a 4K thing for a client. I've done stuff for personal projects that have been output in 4K, but it's just that I've got that little bit wiggle room if I need to reframe slightly. Or as Caleb was saying, there's certain jobs where, again, it's not good practice, and I know, but if you've got a very clean, like a solid background, you've got a second angle on it if you're short on resources. So yeah, I haven't shot anything into. No, actually, I tell a lie. The job I've just done, we shot some stuff in 1080 on it because we could get higher frame rates. The guy that I was working with, I think it was on the gimbal. He was using a 6500 on the gimbal, and we, for the higher frame rate, we sacrificed the 4K and went down to 1080. But generally, yeah, everything's in 4K, but everything's output in 1080 still for me. But it's a safety net.
Similar answer. You know, it's sort of the, you know, what you're saying, Caleb, is sort of you know, we're saying that if you look at 1080 on 4K displays, especially larger ones, we can actually see that it's soft. But we're still very much shooting UHD 4K, and we're finishing in 1080. So a lot of us are creating 1080 content from that 4K. There's some huge advantages from an optical standpoint. You know, the depth of field doesn't change when you punch into your shot. So if you're shooting on a white cyc or a black background or green screen, it doesn't really matter, but you will kind of notice a difference, but we do it. And this is the reason that we're going to be buying lots and lots and lots of 8K cameras in the future, or at minimum 5 or 6K cameras, because we're so used to being able to reframe, punch in, and do the things that we want to do with our footage, that unless we compose for the resolution that we're delivering in, and we are getting into the habit of not doing that, then we are going to be looking for those higher resolution cameras, which is where in the lower end of the market, we haven't even discussed this. EVA 1 is a digital cinema camera, $7,500, $7,300. That does 5.7K externally. We could easily see mirrorless cameras in the future that are shooting 5 to 8K in terms of resolution, for the very reason of this conversation, which is that we need to, and we will have to, deliver in UHD 4K in the future, because the vast majority of displays are 4K. Every display that's basically sold in the United States right now in a Walmart, in a Best Buy, on Amazon is UHD 4K. There's a few HD displays hanging around, but they're few and far between. So we have to really think about, as content creators, delivering in 4K resolution in the future. And if we capture in 4K, but we crop and we deliver in 1080, we cannot deliver that same master to the audience in the same way in 4K. We have to know that we have to start either thinking again of composing for 4K, or we're going to have to move to higher resolution cameras so we can punch in and reframe, which is what we're going to do. Let's just be honest.
So just on another point on that, there's another big advantage to that shooting in the higher res and coming down. So obviously there's the sharpness thing, there's the being able to reframe, but there's also a noise issue with it, in that your noise is vastly reduced if you shoot in higher, and that's a massive thing.
Also, to get back to Loom's question, like, is there a reason to shoot 1080? I think the only reasons I would shoot with it are frame rates, which Ben mentioned, and that's a huge one these days on these smaller cameras. Higher frame rates, and then thinking about post. If you're going to be editing a doc on the road while you're shooting a doc, forget 4K. There's no way, man. I'm shooting in 1080. If it means that we're getting something done, then 1080 it is, unless you're dealing with proxy. So those would be probably my main two. Or if you have no other choice, you know.
So what do we have for another question? Maybe we're at almost an hour and 10 here. Ben is he's going to be 3 sheets in the ditch soon.
And I've got an early interview to shoot in the morning as well.
Yeah. So do we want to find one more question, Caleb? I feel like we barely scratched the surface here. Wouldn't you say, sir?
Yeah, I agree.
Here's
a good one. Now. Yeah, exactly. Good thing we're doing this every week, right?
Hell yeah.
Great question from Black Film Guild. When are we going to see Rec 2020 in the mainstream?
Ooh, can I answer that one initially?
No, it's all you, man. This is your area of wizardry.
Not really. Rec 2020 in the mainstream already exists in a big way from an acquisition standpoint in digital cinema cameras. There's no question about it. It's catching up in mirrorless and DSLRs, or we'll just say mirrorless cameras, small form factor. The problem in our whole workflow is the display technology. It's the displays catching up with what the cameras are already capable of capturing. So if we go into any of these cameras that cost $4,000 to $10,000 even, they're all capable, for the most part, of capturing in a wider than Rec 2020 color gamut, and a dynamic range that's at least 12, upwards of 16 stops of dynamic range from a gamma standpoint. So we will see this all happening when the displays from Sony and Flanders and Canon do not cost $20,000 to $40,000, and when they start to cost more like $2,000 to $5,000, and we actually start to use P3 and then eventually 2020 LUTs, and the displays really have to catch up from the consumer standpoint. And then when we can see 85 to closer to 100% of Rec 2020, then it'll not only change the way we color grade, but it will also change the way we light in production. That's a big answer, but that's the thing, or the things I'm thinking about. Ben?
Well, yeah, it's displays. So, but it's how are we consuming the media that we're producing, or how is the audience consuming that media? And if it's drama, and we're high budget drama, and Netflix are going into this, and we're on the displays that are being able to display the 2020 color space, and that's luminance, then great. But for a lot of what I guess we're all doing, is the audience for that material going to be viewing it on that? How much of that is going to be viewed on high-end displays at home? How much of it is going to be displayed on a laptop or on a phone? And we're nowhere near that yet.
Yeah,
so the cameras we're shooting on have been able to capture that kind of dynamic range for quite a few years now. But exactly as you were saying, the displays aren't there yet. And until they catch up, like, we need to be aware of it, we need to be thinking about it. But right now, certainly for me, the stuff that I'm producing and the audience for the stuff I'm producing are not watching it on displays that are capable of displaying that.
Yes, and we should acknowledge a couple of things and just follow up from Black Film Guild. First of all, BT 2100 is sort of the standard. It's the gold standard for how we deliver content going in the future. It supports Rec 709 as a color space. So we don't have to deliver in P3. We don't have to deliver it in Rec 2020. But Black Film Guild says he has Rec 2020 on his C300 Mark II, but he never uses it, or I'm assuming maybe it's a she. But the thing is that on a camera system, a digital cinema camera that has a high data rate, you can capture in a big color gamut. In fact, you can, on a Canon camera, capture in cinema gamut, which is even bigger than Rec 2020. but then you could use and start with a Rec. 709 LUT for your post-production process and have a master that has that expanded color space, and then keep that in the future along with all that dynamic range, which is the log part of your recording. So think about that in the future. Don't limit yourself to recording in Rec. 709, which limits you with what you can push your content to in the future in terms of the displays that you are going to want to deliver content to, you know, in the not so distant time period in our world that we live in. Mind blown, mic dropped. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Caleb, you're up.
Oh, snap. What Jem said about all the Rec. 2020 stuff.
Okay.
Just following up, people asked about my favorite camera at the moment, GH5S. Throw a speed booster at it, the 0.64. You're getting pretty close to full frame. I like it. And of course, I'm covering. Now, if I was not doing this channel or my channel, which is smaller, intermediate, up to $3,400 cameras, if I was not buying these and covering them, and I was just back to shooting freelance, I would totally own an FS5 or a Red. FS5, because if I'm doing corporate, I'm done. It does everything I need it to do. A variable ND, so I can go out and shoot, you know, some terrible B-roll if I have to, and I can just, you know, it's just super easy, right? Maybe not my most favorite image out there, but it would get the job done. And then Red, just because it's hot and raw and everything about Red I dig, but it's expensive. Yeah.
Good. And I mean, I would say, Caleb, on both of those, it's completely different ends of the spectrum, but you're choosing that Panasonic because you're getting things that at the moment internally don't exist on any other mirrorless camera on the market. And that's not just bit depth, data rate, and all the other stuff. It's also the assist functions. I mean, waveform monitors and all that crazy stuff. I mean, the biggest place that Panasonic probably lacks at the moment is in the autofocus category. But beyond that particular part of it, they're killing it overall.
Well, in like Ben's scenario of climbing up the mountain, a GH5S, if you're okay with not having wicked autofocus with a speed booster, if you want something a little wider. But again, keep in mind, GH5S is in between Micro Four Thirds and APS-C.
Yeah.
So it's significantly larger. And no more recorders, 400 megabits a second, 10-bit 422. The cards are going to be expensive. You have 2 slots, so you've got great redundancy. And then you can throw that little XLR unit, which is really good. Like, I would say it's better than the Sony version.
Yep.
It's really, really solid preamps, and you're done. You got this dynamite little camera package. And that's why, but autofocus is rough. And Vlog, I mean, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Oh, here we go. The Vlog is just so good. You turn it on or you turn it off. Yeah, if you want to screw with the contrast sharpness, you can. The LUT's great. And all I ever do with that is I throw the LUT on it to get it back to a 709 scenario. And then I just take my reds and just move it over a little bit to get back on the skin tone line. And I'm out.
I love the way Panasonic handles that, because if you go into Vlog, you're basically wide color gamut and you are highest dynamic range. And so it's simplicity. It's not, look, I love the C300 Mark II and I can choose all those things. I understand what they all are. But for somebody who wants to go out and just shoot, I think it's a much smarter system. In fact, again, going back to Arri, that's the way Arri does it. Log C, boom, widest color gamut and widest dynamic range. Simple, and that is better. By the way, Brian, I just want to note that it is not a red friend, it's a red buddy. And I don't mean that. It's just we're trying to establish something here. We're looking for red buddies. A red friend is somebody who's almost casual. Like, you know, you pass them in the street, there's my red friend. But a red buddy you're attached to. It's somebody who's a part of your life. So let's all strive for red buddies in our life. I think that that's probably what we're trying to get. Aren't we, Caleb?
Yep.
Or not?
Yep. red buddies and trying to manage
that as a slight. I'm
bag
just saying,
of dongles.
Yeah. Bag of wait, hold on.
Dongles in a bag and move on.
This is what a bag of dongles looks like, by the way. There's a hard drive in there too, but it's basically a bag of dongles. Gentlemen, let me just say that we should probably cut this thing off at the hour mark, because as I switch between everybody,
I know it's a school night. We're all going to be hanging tomorrow.
Oh man!
Quickly register Red Buddy channel. Can you actually register that, Caleb? Let's get some SEO going on there.
This is going to be the new. This is going to be the new Tinder.
No, yes. How about red.buddy? I mean, that should just be. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Overall, there's Caleb. There's Ben. There's me. Ben will be even more in focus next week at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I would encourage you at the moment to look under the fold and to subscribe not only to the C47 YouTube channel, but also to DSLR Video Shooter. One of these days in the near future, our friend Ben will be up and running, and then you will be able to subscribe to his channel as well. And it is really great for this first official episode to not only be here with two of my really, really close friends, but to just sit here and talk about gear and have all of these people interacting and doing all of this stuff. Anything you want to say for the sign off, Mr. Caleb Pike?
Thanks for joining us, guys. Make sure you subscribe. And next Wednesday,
6 p.m. Eastern.
Same deal.
Yep.
Right on.
Do it. And by the way, we're looking for topics. So, you know, whether that's for Caleb talking about his stuff on DSLR Video Shooter, or for me with my Gearbox 2.0, but more importantly here for Camera Flask, if there's a topic that you want us to talk about, we are happy to make that the main topic of our episode. We will also in the future have gear that we love to use. We lovingly called this in the past, I'll show you yours if you show me mine. Is that what we called it?
You already showed us your dongles, so we're good.
It's all over. Ben, what do you got to say? I'll show you mine if you show me yours. That's how. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Always amazing to hang out with you. It's a shame we're not doing it in person more often, but we need to sort that out soon. And looking forward to getting this back on the road weekly.
Right on.
Absolutely. And 360 grad, it doesn't have to just be about gear. We can talk about craft. We can talk about photography. We can talk about
more drink,
and being a bunch of, as you can see here, as it said here, a bunch of dongles. We're going to keep it as Camera Flask, but you can basically call it also a bunch of dongles. And I'm signing off.
Fest.
Ben, go ahead, give your little, your little sign off there.
All right, you doing check tonight? Nazdar dobranoc.
Whoa, do it again. Do it again. One more time.
That's spicy.
One more time.
Nazdar dobranoc.
Holy mother. And Caleb.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching, guys. Love y'all.
Love you guys. See ya next week.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. See ya.
Bye-bye.